Good morning, REC Nation. Welcome to the Brunch with REC. It's a beautiful day in August. Thank you for everyone joining us live as well as watching the recording. We have a great discussion today. We have one of REC's referral partners out in Belleville and the surrounding area. His name is George Wang, who is a wealth of knowledge. He's going to be talking a bit about his investment story, why he got into investing, especially in that multifamily realm or that world. As well, he's going to talk about the market being Belleville and the growth that is coming to it and that we're already experiencing. So Nick, if you don't mind just bringing George on. George, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
So George is already working with some of our REC insiders, but for everyone who doesn't know George, you have to, at least by the end of this discussion today, go and follow him on Instagram. He has some great content. And George, I'm looking forward to the conversation today. Thank you so much for joining us again.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for inviting me.
So George, I wanted to break down the conversation today in a few different parts. And I always, first and foremost, just want to learn more about your investment, your path and why you chose to invest into real estate and make it your passion and your career. And we'll talk a bit about the transition into real estate. And then after that, let's learn more about Belleville, because it's a market that a lot of insiders I'm speaking with are interested in, especially because of the cost of entry and the growths that are happening there. And we'll talk a little bit about some of that employment rumors that are no longer rumors, I believe. And then we'll talk a little bit about how you help investors in that third part of the conversation. So in regards to yourself as an investor, George, why is it that you started investing into real estate?
So interesting story. So back when I first graduated from school, I actually worked as a pharmacist, healthcare provider. After 7 years of post-secondary education, I found myself incredibly dissatisfied with life and where I was in life in terms of my profession and what I did for a living. And just the reality of doing that for the next 40 years is incredibly miserable thought. So I stumbled upon this beautiful book and chapters called Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Nice.
And the gateway drug in real estate investing for a lot of people. And and I went from there. I've been just obsessed with this is not the life I want to lead. How can I replace my job income with cash flow from some kind of asset? And of course the book highly pushes real estate. So that's where I went. My explicit goal was to invest in real estate to the point where all of my properties would cash flow to an extent where it would cover for my entire life expenses and more, so that I didn't have to work anymore. And then I could do whatever I wanted. So that's how I got started in real estate investing. That was back in 2019. Nice. And I started investing. One of the first investments I purchased was actually a student rental in Belleville. For those of you, you're like, what school, right? We have a community college called Loyalist College here in Belleville. I believe this year they enrolled about 4,000 people. And what's interesting about that is that about half of them are international, so they need a place to live. The locals, They drive to school every day. They don't mind. They're usually within 20 minutes of the school. But the international students, they're coming from India, Africa, whatever. They have to find a place to stay. So I rented that place to students, made a ton of cash flow. That was probably it's actually to this day was the highest cash flow I've ever had for any single property.
Do you know what the average kind of per door for the student rental in Belleville is?
Well, it's higher now, but back then I was charging between 600. Okay, there were some really small rooms I charged $550 for, but up to I think 700 for the biggest room that they had in that place.
And what about now?
Now you're looking at 900.
Wow, that's actually very comparable to Waterloo.
Yeah,
the only thing $900 to $950 a door.
The only thing you have to consider is that, and remember, this is not something that even the landlords even want, but this is what the market is demanding right now, is that they prefer to go 2 per room. That's just the market. That's just the demographic of the students.
Dorm style.
So they can't afford 900 per person, but they can afford 450, 400 ish.
Yeah.
So, um,
And,
so
and you
for
know what?
example,
I think it's more the way that as a landlord, just from my experience, presents the property. You can't have it like a boarding house where there's so many people crammed into the room to the house. But if you position the property in a way where it's clean, where it's efficient. I went to university and I stayed in the dorm as well for the first 2 years. So
yeah,
it's very common, right?
exactly. As long as you don't have, as long as you have a reasonable number of bathrooms per
Yeah.
ratio to bedrooms, it's fine. And with the big, what I did was I was making so much cash flow that I actually just paid for a cleaner to come every week. Because
That's
common
nice.
areas, who's gonna claim it, right? When they're all individual renting rooms, who's gonna say I'm gonna clean the bathroom?
Yeah.
Who's gonna clean the
And
living room, right?
potentially you
So
get people arguing too, like the
yeah,
students itself, or the
hmm
tenants' relationships. Especially, that's a that's a really good point that you just actually made there, which is, you know, you have to go a little bit above and beyond and be creative. Trying to manage tenant relations.
exactly,
They're the ones
exactly.
paying off your mortgage and providing you cash flow in this situation.
Yeah, I think that single property was making it exceeded $2,000 a month in cash flow. That single property. So I did that in the beginning, and then what I learned was the property management part I was doing myself, because first of
Hmm.
all, no property management company would actually do student rentals. It's challenging. I get it. I
Yeah,
wouldn't do it for other people
with the
either.
turnover too.
Yeah. So I was doing it, and I found it quite time consuming. It wasn't definitely not in terms of what I want out of life, something I want to be doing long term for sure.
Yeah.
And two, what happened was, keep in mind this is 2019. I was doing great. Belleville's, I believe that year was a record breaking year for a number of international students. So like, and I feel like if feel bad, like some of these students, they don't realize how bad the housing situation is here in Canada. So I had a kid, literally, he got out the airport. Someone dropped him off in Belleville. He just had a suitcase in hand, and he was expecting someone was going to rent to him that night. Yeah, poor kid. I actually
Yeah.
let him
Sorry,
stay.
buddy.
Yeah, I let him stay there for 2 days and then he decided if he wants to stay there long term or not.
Yeah.
And I just charged him just per day, and he eventually he actually moved out because he found a cheaper place with a friend. But it's just
That's
it feels so bad.
the Jazz always says ready, fire, aim, and that is full ready, fire, aim. There, he just got on the plane. It's like, oh, I'll figure it out. I'll
Yeah.
get there, and then I'll find housing.
Um,
Which is, yeah, I've never heard that before.
yeah. I mean, the college, what they do is I believe back then they allowed them to stay at their dorm for 5 days
Hmm.
while you search for housing. Because I mean, I get it. It's how can you trust someone across the globe and you trust them with your first and last deposit if you haven't met them yet, right?
Yeah,
A lot of scammers out there nowadays as well,
they
scamming
haven't
the
even seen the
international students.
property. You don't even know if the
Exactly,
property is there.
exactly. But back then it was brutal. It was brutal. It was like we were at the beginning spike of the rental increases, and these kids had no idea what they're getting themselves into. They're calling you like, "Hey, my budget's $300 a month." I'm like, "Sorry, buddy, not here."
Yeah,
Anyway, long story short, all good things come to an end. The problem with that one was Belleville's not our median income isn't the highest. So when you're looking at the room rental demographic, it's at least back then it wasn't the greatest if you weren't thinking about international students.
yep,
And of course, the pandemic happened, and my international students by the end of 2020, the next year wasn't coming.
yeah,
So I I rented it to some locals, people who needed room rental. It just wasn't going well. So by 2021, I ended up selling it. I made a good profit for sure.
yeah.
But
From 2019 to 2021, we saw 20% jumps in certain
yeah,
markets, right? Belleville during the pandemic had a big jump in price, if I remember correctly, in
there was a
values.
year where we almost hit 40%.
Yeah, yeah. They caught up to certain areas around the GTA.
Hmm.
Well, not caught up, but it was the spillover from the growth that was happening there.
Yeah, let me give you some context. That property was probably 4,000 square feet. Um, I got it for four something. So
And
back then,
so
which
so
was
so so
expensive.
when you sold that property, where was your mindset then? What types of opportunities were you looking to kind of then
So
transition the proceeds over?
I knew I didn't want to do property management anymore, just period. And what I found challenging was with student rentals, most A lenders don't include room rentals as part of qualifying for your mortgage. So
Yeah.
I started hitting a bit of a wall. It's like, okay, I need to buy something that property managers are willing to take on, and two, that will help me qualify for future purchases. So I just started picking up, just like duplexes, triplexes, whatever came on the market, the numbers that made sense. Back then, that was big wave of rent spike in Belleville at the same time,
Hmm.
and it was kind of odd. It was a weird time where people didn't realize how big of a difference market rent and existing rent could
Yeah.
be. And I think a lot of back then nobody knew what Belleville was. I was the only person I felt like in the world when I went to a real estate meetup,
Okay.
and like there'll
Belleville.
be.
Sorry, are you saying Barry? Are you saying Barry? Belleville?
I started saying like, you know where Kingston is, right? Just stop an hour before you get there. That's Belleville. It's like, oh yeah, I think I went to I went to a Starbucks there, or I went to go to the food court there. That's usually what they say.
That's right.
Um,
That's us. That's me.
yeah. So I picked up these
Yeah. So
duplexes, and
duplexes, triplexes.
yeah, and I would just specifically look for vacant ones because back then I guess the market hasn't smartened up quite yet, and the vacant and occupied rent duplexes were selling around the same price.
Mm.
And so, for example, one of the earlier duplexes I bought, actually before I sold that student rental, was a duplex. It was a rougher duplex. It was actually used as a student rental as well, mid 2020, and the seller was selling because the students weren't coming back the next year.
Yeah.
And I bought it for 255. And I looked at the pictures. I'm like, I don't understand what's wrong with this place. I
Yeah.
know I can. I don't have to do any renovations. I can rent 1,600 per unit. So my mortgage is like
That's amazing.
$874 a month, I think, still, and I was making 3,200 a month coming in. And I guess nobody took like. I asked if I can get vacant possession, and they said sure. So just little things like that, just buying vacant, focusing on vacant duplexes was a lot of my priority in those early days. And then moving
I think
forward,
especially now too, right? Unless the property jumps out at you and it's such a great value, like I would always want to take possession vacant. You never want to assume another landlord's decision when it comes to screening prospective tenants. Not that they're not bad tenants, but you don't know. You're not the one who decided it, and then the
well,
fate's in someone else's hands there.
and they're paying like $800 a month.
Yeah,
That's the big
lower
problem.
rents as well. Yeah,
Yeah. Um, so eventually the market smartened up, and the vacant ones started selling for twice as much as the non-vacant ones. And
yeah,
that's when I realized, okay. And then also the duplexes that I bought, they were the legal non-conforming ones, so they were just quite old, kind of DIY. Somebody did DIY at some point. It wasn't the best craftsmanship. I found there was more often maintenance concerns that I would have liked. So I said, okay, well, if I can't buy a good vacant duplex, then I'm going to make my own vacant duplex. So I started doing duplex conversions.
nice.
And then
And this was in like 2021 now at this point.
2021 now. Yep. And what I like about duplex conversions is that you're gutting the basement, and
Yeah,
that's where all the everything's exposed. So in the opportunity, I make everything brand new practically. So I know from peace of mind that I'm doing everything right, and there's no shoddy craftsmanship anywhere.
yeah. And then do you do the work yourself, or do you have a team there that does it?
Um, from the early days, I would do little stuff like flooring, painting. When I started doing duplex conversions, at the beginning, I wasn't as experienced, and I got scared of the more electrical, plumbing, HVAC. Just
Yeah,
I didn't want to do it in the wrong order and things like that. And fire separation was a big thing. I wanted to make sure I worked with someone who knew how to do that. So I
yeah,
didn't. I just hired a GC. I'm like, hey, give me a quote. I'll write you a check. Take care of it.
yeah. And then
Yeah.
how's your like? Are you still with that same team, or do you have a
I've
few?
I've bounced around, not because I don't like any of them. It's I've used, there's probably 3 or 4 that I go back to, just entirely
Nice,
based on availability.
nice.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
good.
it's just
Yeah, I find. I find like screening for contractors, screening for property managers are the hardest, personally from my experience. But with contractors, I always try and get two or three in at one time, and then from there you can kind of see who's best suited for that job.
Yeah, and here is a lot of word of mouth. One thing I do want to say is that in a smaller city, you just want to be mindful of your relationship with the contractors. In Belleville, for
Mm-hmm.
whatever reason, they're all related to each other, and
True.
I've
Family
heard of stories
business.
where you burn one contractor and nobody ever picks up your phone ever again.
Wow.
Yeah, nobody will ever call you back. So just keep that in mind. Small town
Yeah.
things. But yeah, that's where I was at, and then eventually I just felt the need to constantly challenge myself, just do more complicated projects. So I started doing instead of buying duplex conversions, I would buy existing duplexes and just fully gut them and redo them because they were really rough. And my most recent project, which I just finished last week, it took way longer than it really should, but it was a fourplex. It was a special one, all right. It was
Yeah.
like it
Did you
should have
buy
been
it
long.
as a
It was a
pre-existing
fourplex.
fourplex or a
Yeah,
conversion?
yeah, but there's lots of problems with it.
Okay.
It was like a hoarder. It was one of the units was like a hoarder. The other unit had like 22 cats. The other unit was, I guess, a chain smoker inside.
Uh,
One unit was okay, um, and it was all knob and tube, all galvanized plumbing. Like this thing was built in the late 1800s. Beautiful house. And then later I knew the roof was actively leaking, and later I found it had 6 layers of shingles on it.
mm,
Just but it's okay. I bought it with the intention of fully gutting
Gutting
it.
it. Yeah.
So I got a pretty good deal on it. Probably put in $250,000 since then. And now it's I just finished. We had to wait a little bit to get the separate metering put in. We use the Lexicon Energy here. For those of you who are in Whitby, you have suffered the same troubles. They're just really
And
slow.
this is delay, right? Yeah. Delays of
Yeah,
install.
yeah. I was done everything. But until I got the meters put in, the smoke detectors couldn't be tested, so I couldn't get occupancy.
And then now you're in the process of renting them out.
Yeah, I still gotta wait for the washer and dryer to show up, but that's fine as long as it shows up before
Yeah.
move in, right?
Yeah.
Um,
That's great. And in regards to the rents, like what are we looking at right now, like rental prices?
Depends on how nice the units are. If we're talking about, let's say you just did a duplex conversion and you have a basement suite and you just did a really nice job on it, and maybe you decided to put stone countertops, backsplash, tile backsplash, and tiled shower, vinyl floors, standard stuff, and nice and clean. And if you did have 2 parking spots, you could push $2,000 a month for a 2 bed.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's
that's
great.
with
And then what about the upper? Like a 3 bedroom upper?
3 bed upper, 3 bed, 1 bath upper. I saw somebody get 2,400 once.
So we're talking,
You,
let's say conservatively
23 is
4,200
pretty
bucks.
easy. 23 is
Yeah,
pretty easy to get.
23. So $4,200 a month. I'd call it conservative gross rent. And
Yep.
what's the purchase price right now for one of those duplexes?
For the longest time, you had to pay close to 500 for them because of the market. But now
Yeah.
you can pick them up for, depending on how much work you want to do. Generally, if you want the upstairs to be ready to go, you're probably paying close to 500. But if
Yep.
you're buying something where the upstairs needs work as well, you can get them for the mid to low 400s.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's great. So you get cash flow walking in, after you're
Pretty
doing
much.
some of that work. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're putting 100 in most likely after with the renos, and that's for the basement only.
Yeah.
And anything you do the top, it's on top of that. But like, let's
Yep.
say, let's say you bought for 450, let's say you're 150 in,
So 90. Okay. Yeah.
so you're all in at 600. But
Yep.
you're making 4,300, 4,200 off rent when you're done.
And then now once interest rates start creeping down a little bit, that cash flow is that's gonna be great.
Yeah.
And I think those markets, like I've invested in London in the past as well, which is a great market for future growth. But I believe that you do need to see some cash flow there. You can't just bank on the passive appreciation. You got to be able to get both there.
Yeah, absolutely. Cash flow, depending on how high your ARV is, if the bank says your valuation is super high and you decide to take 80% of it, then you're probably going to be maybe marginally in cash flow neutral or negative in that case.
Yeah.
But it depends on how much you decide to take out, right?
Yep.
But from an ARV standpoint, okay, anybody who's interested in doing duplex conversions in Bevel, I have this disclaimer. We don't have any comps for sold duplexes, just at all. No one
No
who's
comps.
made one of these has ever sold one on
Mm.
MLS. Okay. What that means is that when the appraisers come, they're pulling numbers out of their ass. But I can tell you anecdotally what people in my network have got. They mostly fall in the mid to high 600s, and a few outliers here and there. Just one of my clients who bought in September last year. They finished spring of this year. No, they finished actually not too long ago. It took a little longer than they thought, and the appraiser said it was 750. Like, what? Where'd you get that from? But realistically, I've also had some horror stories where the appraiser said that, hey, I had a friend of mine who had an appraiser come in and said, yeah, it's worth 550. He's like, what do you mean? The bungalow across the street that's without a basement is 550.
Yeah. It's why one of the deals fell through for me personally. Like we were looking at a turnkey duplex in Oshawa, got it for a great price, but the appraisal company only looked at that street because of where it was. There wasn't that much residential around it, which killed the deal. It means we had to put a little bit too much than we wanted to in, and it happens. And then for more of the novice investors or listeners right now, the reason why George brought that up, I'm thinking anyways, is because let's say you're doing a single family home and you're converting it to a duplex. At the point when the duplex is converted, you have the ability to now see what the home is worth, and you can pull out the equity, pay yourself back, which is why he brought that up. I take it, right, George?
Yes, exactly. That's the majority of the strategy. A lot of my clients, they don't necessarily have the renovation funds in cash, so a lot of times they use HELOCs, home equity line of credits, and raising funds from family perhaps, or even credit cards. So they do really need that appraisal value to be there to get their money back. So in that example where they valued at 550, he challenged that and they sent it another appraiser. The second appraiser said it was 680. Just the casual difference of 130,000.
But it's worth knowing the service providers.
Yeah, but that's the challenge with having no comps, right? They have to make some stretches and like logical stretches in decision making, and not everybody makes the same line of thinking, which is how that happens. Once we actually have some finished duplex, we're pretty. I would say I wouldn't consider our market a mature market at all in terms of an investment space. So we're still pretty young. If you do invest here, there's pros and cons of being a pioneer, right? The pro being you're not facing 100 other investors when you're bidding into one of these typical bungalows that you can convert. The con being is you don't really know what your refinance value would be because there's no comps.
Yeah, but it'll come.
It will come. And the same challenge nowadays is facing now with Bill 23 passing with these making ADU third units, usually in the backyard. A lot of my clients are doing, instead of building a detached structure from scratch, that costs too much money here, just relative to the purchase price. Like to do one of those from scratch, you're paying at least 200, up to 300 in some cases. And like a bungalow is 450. So what's the point, right? At least you get the land. At least you get the land with it too. But a lot of times we have a lot of properties that just come with a detached double car garage on them. And we just convert those for about 100,000.
You put a loft in the top?
No, we turn the garage itself to a.
Turn the whole garage. Oh, great.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
Yeah, we actually have height requirements for ADUs, so you can't do a second story quite yet. But we just turned the garage itself to a two bedroom apartment, and I had a friend of mine who just rented his out for $2,350 a month. What was a former garage? Pretty sweet.
It feels like Belleville is the new Windsor. You know how Windsor was the hot market, probably like 2017 to 2019 because of the cost of entry as well as cash flow. It's like I'm just hearing you say it seems very similar to what we were seeing back then in Windsor.
Yeah, what I like about Belleville is that the lots are just big. I'm I'm past the needing cash flow point. So right now I'm just looking for properties that just sit on a unusually large plot of land, and as long as it
Yeah.
services itself, I'm waiting the long game now.
Well, I think that's a natural progression, especially like what you've done successfully is that you're able to transition and you're generating enough income, to offset the majority, I take it, of your living expenses. Um, and then you reach a point where now let's focus on nest, right? Let's build a really good base. It's great to hear that it is possible. I speak with a lot of investors and insiders that are trying to do that. And it's always good to hear from someone that actually did take action. And I'm sure for the first year and a half, 2 years, you were out of your comfort zone a bit, and you were kind of learning as you were doing, which is very natural. But look what happens, right? You put your head down, you work hard, and you look up, in 3 years, and you see what you've created, which is congrats. That's great to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. It was not easy. A lot of naysayers along the way. I would say the people that you thought were your supporters, and like, what? That's impossible. You can't do that. It's like, well, watch me, right?
Yeah, I'm gonna do it. I love it. Yeah, and I think it's about having a plan as well. For everyone listening, we have at REC, we have a program called the Real Estate Action Plan. It's a call with myself or one of our investment coaches where, we help you, build that short-term and long-term plan. We help you, bring some clarity to what you're thinking, and tell you some realistic approaches to this. I make it hard sometimes, and George, you'll love this. I do make it hard sometimes because, investing in real estate, there's not like a do this and then do that and then do that. You'll be able to build wealth. There's so many different approaches and plans, and it really depends on your timeline, your capital, what you're looking to get out of that investment. And I make it hard even after the conversation, the first one. I don't make it easy because my job is to show you what's in front of you so you can make that informed decision. So, if you're expecting just to hear one option from me, you won't get it. Insiders who are listening, you get two or three, and you have to sit down with yourself to think about what's best. And I don't make it easy.
No, there's so many different ways to make money in real estate.
So many.
And you have to decide what makes sense for you, your circumstances, what capital you have, and what lifestyle you want.
When do you want to see the results of the growth? Like that's different as well. You're talking about conversions versus turnkey, resale versus pre-construction. There's so many different options. It depends on when do you want to get that return, or are you okay with waiting and seeing a potentially higher return? So it's a tough one. So in regards to Belleville, why don't we talk about the potential growth that's happening there? Why should investors look into Belleville other than obviously the cash flow, which is what we've already spoken about?
So Belleville, I can't recall exactly which report it was, but we were the #1 population growth city in all of Canada, something like 5% in 1 year.
Wow.
I think the Canadian average was 3%, I believe. So we are growing very fast, and I feel it every day when I drive around. I'm like, oh my God, there's a lot of traffic. I don't remember it being this bad, which relative to Toronto is nothing, by the way. I'm just complaining.
Relative, right?
Yeah, but like ultimately, in my personal opinion, the ultimate driver, we can talk about, different key factors that influence property value, but population growth is got to be the most important one. People, houses, when we have rentals, whether we're selling or renting them, the key idea is that someone is going to live there. And the more of that someone's are out there, then the more you can get for it. So that's why I like Belleville, the demand. And I was just listening to a podcast yesterday, and they said, Belleville's 5% growth, the highest in the entire country, and our housing starts grew by a total of 0%. So we're going to
see the demand. Well, and also we're already seeing it in the GTA as well, right? With interest rates rising the way that they've done, developers are holding off on their construction, which means that unfortunately we're kicking the can down the road in regards to these challenges that we're currently facing, which is supply. And you're seeing it on the micro level there.
Absolutely. The prices out here, the reason why we're able to demand such crazy rents, like where our rents, I would think, are comparable to Oshawa, Kitchener, Hamilton
Yeah,
ish, and our purchase price is like half, right? The reason we're able to demand such prices is because of how many people are moving here.
yeah, that's great. And then, what is the rumor in Belleville in regards to the future employment? Who is
Um,
coming to Belleville, or who will
so
be coming to Belleville?
for the longest time, there was a very large commercial facility, a giant warehouse being built. The city did not announce who it was. It was 1 million square foot. The building permit itself cost the builder $1.7 million.
Mm.
The permit application fee itself, and everyone was saying, "Oh my God, is that Amazon coming?" And actually, earlier this year, the mayor officially announced that Amazon is indeed coming to Bevel, and that's the
Oh,
facility
let's
there.
go.
Yeah, yeah. And I was like, oh, you know what? This is perfect. That makes perfect sense because, in terms of where we are geographically, we're on the 401, and we're right in the middle between Toronto and Ottawa. It just makes perfect sense for any logistics company to base, storing their stuff here. And
Yeah.
Amazon's not the only company who's been doing it. A lot of other companies, maybe not as famous as Amazon, but I've noticed a lot of warehouses popping up here with just distribution logistics facilities in this area.
As
And
long as there's an espresso there, Nespresso
yeah,
distribution, that's all I care
like
about. That's great though.
to give you some context, the city estimates about 800 to 1,000 people coming to work in that Amazon facility. The population of Belleville currently is 56,000 people. If you add 1,000 to 50,000, that's an increase of 2%. So the Amazon alone will bring an population increase of 2% in Belleville, and that's assuming they're all single individuals
Hmm.
moving to the area. If they bring their family with them, if let's say the average family size is 2 people, that's an increase of 4% in population alone.
That's great. So yeah, I think everyone who's listening today should reach out to myself or George and look at some opportunities. It once you see the infrastructure, one of the ways that REC analyzes opportunities in markets, we take a look at transit infrastructure, employment growth, or employment infrastructure that is in place as well as pending, for future development, as well. Then we look at other development that's happening around, and we want to get into an area as early as possible. And for us, knowing from what you just said, which is Amazon and other major employment infrastructure, which will be coming in there, I'm sure, especially because of the ability to with space. There's no, it's a good opportunity to at least have that long term play. And right now, if you can buy something with cash flow, you're doing both. You're getting that long term growth as well as getting a return today.
Speaking of transit infrastructure, so our busing system sucks. That's you're waiting 45 minutes for every bus. But what's interesting about what was part of the deal for the Amazon going with the city was that they are getting a dedicated 401 interchange that goes straight to the industrial park.
Oh wow!
Yeah, and so right now we have, I think, two or three on-off ramps from the 401.
Yep,
They're getting a dedicated one that goes straight to the industrial park because of the Amazon. That was part of the deal.
that's going to be big for the for that market, for that local
Yeah,
market.
and obviously the industrial park is not just Amazon, but now everyone else in that park is going to benefit a lot from this. And then now other companies are going to want to move here because we have this infrastructure in place.
Yeah, that's great. And then some of these smaller logistic companies, they'll leverage the infrastructure that's being built because of Amazon. So that's exciting. I'm sure you're pumped for that in your local market.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's a lot of hype. I have a couple of friends who are in property management, and they're already telling me they're starting to get rental applications from Amazon workers. And he's like, he sees their offer letters, like, wow, these are good applicants.
That's good. Yeah, that'll naturally come in the first wave too.
Yeah.
And in regards to kind of just shifting, because right now with interest rates, the way that they are, we are starting to see, with the higher on the GTA side as well, maybe more on a macro scale, we are starting to see the ability to get mortgages, especially having to deal with the stress test as well. Purchasers needing to be approved up to that 9% or 9% plus at this point. We are starting to see a lack of buyers presence, and it is affecting our micro market. And for everyone listening, Jazz and Simeon went over that at our last brunch with REC. So make sure to watch some of the recordings there. How are you finding the Belleville market right now? With some of these changes in the market.
So the Belleville market, since the start of the interest rate hikes and the decline starting around mid-year last year, we fell a bit, but it was not an even. How to describe it? The high end of the market came down a lot more than the low end of the market, because the Belleville market, we were pretty cheap to begin with. Our average sale price was always between 500 and 600. For a while, we were over 600.
Yeah.
But that's a mix. You're looking at some nice single family homes, new construction selling for the 800s. And then we have some starter homes, in the 3s and 4s. And what I noticed was nothing happened to the starter homes. Nothing happened to the investor grade property that was a little rough. They didn't really fall at all, because you get to a point where two people working at McDonald's full time can easily afford it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You can't go below that. There's no way. Like minimum wage full time is $2,000 a month. People
have the ability to get that mortgage. It hasn't changed that much in regards to the ability to get it.
Yeah. What I have seen change is the more high end market. They're struggling quite a bit, and that makes sense, because I think when the economy gets tougher, needs get priority over wants, and having that waterfront or the pool or having the extra bedroom to put your sewing supplies, your gaming gear is no longer a priority.
Yeah, we're noticing that as well. Especially on the freehold sector in the GTA, builder homes are the ones that are most affected. I think because you're paying above what market rent or what market value is at that time for something that's going to be ready in about 2 years. So that we've seen, but condos, a different type of opportunity, but same kind of, ideology there, which is lower cost of entry. They're the everyday starter homes. We're seeing that be okay, with the changes in the market. But yeah, the new builds, the new build freehold are the ones that we're seeing the most affected as well.
Yeah. With that being said, right? we have come up quite a bit. I think last time I checked the stats, we've climbed up significantly since January of this year, up to around May, and we've bought to a point where we were at the same average sell price as June of the previous year in 2022. Yeah, 2022. So we've made quite a good recovery since then, but since then it's been fairly flat.
And I'm sure rents have gone up significantly from last year to this year. Have you seen like a 10-12% jump in rents?
Well, we've always pushed an envelope. I've always tried to get mine for about 10% what the market was really willing to bear with my rentals. Yeah. So I would say maybe $1. I don't know about 10% increase. But I think that it's going to come now with all these highly paid engineers from all these different distribution facilities coming and competing.
As well as international students coming back.
International students. Although I have to say, not that we don't have enough people taking advantage of student rentals. A lot of the local landlords, they don't understand the international culture thing. They don't get the 2 people per room. They don't like the curry smell. And so a lot of them are just regular people living there, right?
Yeah.
So I know quite a few people who are of Indian ethnicity who are just killing it in the international student stage, because they get it. They speak the same language. They don't. There's no culture shock for them. They explain them like, hey, this is how recycling works. So a lot of them, they don't understand how that works, right?
Like, okay, sure. You just gotta tell us to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like it's important with any type of tenant demographic you're renting to, just be upfront and communicate. They're doing you a favor. They're helping you build true wealth. So the least you can do is communicate and talk to them, give them a little bit of a fair shot.
Yeah, Yeah,
Yeah.
we definitely need more people to provide these student rentals, just purely from a not from an investor, not from a realtor perspective, just from the good of these people, these kids that are coming. We need more people to provide housing for them. And if
Yeah.
you can make money at the same time, so be it. That's great.
Well, especially if you can get cash flow in today's market. If you can get cash
Well,
flow in today's market is something for me anyways. I would look at.
I'll give an example. I have a client of mine who bought something end of last year ish, end of last year, early this year. I forgot. It was a 4-bed, 2-bath house, a little rough, a little ugly. We managed to get it for under 350. Not the greatest area, not the greatest shape, but the students don't usually care that much. And boom, it's a student rental right now. It's making close to 4,500 a month right now.
Off of, did you say it was 350? So did they do renovations to it?
They did some renovation, new kitchen. I think they renovated the bathrooms, and then they skipped the flooring. They painted it. So they put in maybe 50K at most.
50. So they put all in probably like 150, 130. No, not even 70, 350, 70K, call it, not even 65. And then, wow, 100K.
Yeah, probably
100K. And
yeah.
they're generating $4,000 a month in cash flow.
Income, not cash flow.
Oh, in income.
Yes.
Gross. Sorry, in gross.
Yeah, gross. And in their challenges, she actually furnished them because the rooms were these, which was why she was able to charge a little more. I think she tried to push beyond 900 per room for some of them. Is because she supplied them bunk beds. Because usually they just buy single beds and they put them on the floor, and most bedrooms are big enough for that. But some of her rooms were a little bit smaller than that, but she still wanted to get the 2 people in there, so she put bunk beds in there.
And in regards to your recommendation in checking in on the tenants, do you have, because now you've done both, you've done your traditional rentals, you've done student housing, do you treat the way that you manage the tenants differently?
Yeah, definitely. You want to be more hands-on and active with the student rentals. You want them to someone needs to be an authority figure in the dorm. When you're in a dorm, there's that, what they call them, RA, resident. Yeah. I forgot what that stands for, but
advisor,
the boss of that floor that you have to listen to, usually an older student. But
yeah,
if you don't have that kind of person there, then you have to be that person who kind of makes sure the rules are followed and petty disputes are resolved.
Yeah. And then do you so how often would you recommend checking in, like, on this type of student rental?
Ideally like once a month.
Yeah, I was gonna say, see, that seems like a right right amount. 12 times a year.
Yeah, and just the students, sometimes they're almost too easygoing and things break and they don't tell you, so you got to go see yourself.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And then what about for your traditional 1-year tenant? Like, what's your kind of rule of thumb for checking in?
I have property managers take care of that for me now, but if I were self-managing, I probably do it twice a year.
Yeah.
It depends on how you do it. So if it's a multi and let's say it's one furnace and only you have access to it, you're gonna go change the filters every 3 months anyway. So you might as well check out the units. But otherwise, probably twice a year. I would time it with when you have to shut off your exterior hoses to winterize your house, and then the next following year when you have to turn everything back on, just to time it perfectly so you don't waste any time.
And do you work with a lot of investors who are outside of Belleville? Like, are they mostly local?
Actually, 99% of them are out of town investors. Most of them GTA, a few from Ottawa.
Nice. Yeah, because the Belleville population just, I would take it like they're mostly just buying for their primary residence at this point.
Yeah, the average Belleville person doesn't really invest in real estate. There's a few savvy tradespeople who are like millionaires that they, believe it or not, a lot of the multifamily here are owned by like 50-year-old plumbers.
Yeah, I remember you telling me that. Like, you're starting to see supply pick up a bit because they're transitioning out of their their employment, their plumbing jobs.
Exactly. But like in terms of like a serial investor, professional investor, we don't have that much locally, and those are really coming from your GTA areas, and that's the kind of person that I. Majority of the people I work with are from out of town, and I would say half of the clients I work with don't even bother coming to see the property before it closes.
So for everyone listening, if you want to start looking at options at $500,000 and sub, I think you got to reach out to George. And George, you are a realtor. You are licensed. I'm not sure if anyone got that at this point. I'm sure they did. What are some of these value types of systems that you have that you might be able to help someone in regards to screening some opportunities?
Okay, so Belleville's not a big market. We don't have that much volume. What that means is that I literally look at every single listing that comes up every day, and I just screen them for what I could do with it. I look at the property's floor plan, and if it's interesting enough, I actually just go myself, take a stroll, take a look at it myself, and determine if it's even worth telling one any about in the first place. I live here. You're 2 hours away. Why come to check it out if it's not even worth coming, right? So I live 10 minutes away. I'm going to swing by, take a look. And then I make sure that the property makes sense for the strategy that you're looking for. If you're looking for a duplex conversion, I make sure the ceiling heights are good. You may have the right separate entrance. The layout makes sense. And if there's any existing things that make it more difficult or make it easier to convert, how it's going to change your budget dramatically, I make sure I let you know. And
it's good to have someone who has experience too, because you've done it yourself. You know what potentially you're looking for.
Honestly, when I go through these houses, I don't really have my realtor hat on. I have my investor hat on. It's like, what would I be looking for if I was buying this, right? And then I just pass that information along. But usually for a lot of these, a lot of times my clients don't actually bother coming at all. I usually, when I do a walkthrough, I'll take a video walkthrough while I'm there, and I'll measure the ceiling with my laser measure on the video so they can see it, and just things like that. And then from there, if they find it satisfactory, we put an offer, and usually, a lot of times they don't bother coming for inspections or anything either. Some of them do, and a lot of times what we do is we line it up specifically so that the inspector is at the same time they can come drive to Bevel, so they can actually see it for the first time. Not everybody's comfortable.
You can go to a local brewery, right?
Yeah,
we talked about before.
Yeah, check out the waterfront. Go grab. There's a nice restaurant that's like a boat, like right off the pier. It's beautiful here. Like, people pay good money to go on vacation here, and it'd be nice to take you the opportunity if you're coming here to enjoy it while you can.
And I know, now that we've spoken now a few times, and you're helping some of our REC insiders. I'm going to talk about Belleville's market a lot, especially like one of the big motivation factors, and I try to get that every time I have these investor calls or these plan building sessions is, what are you looking to get out of this in a year, 5 years? What's your big reason of jumping into another opportunity? And right now people need to offset their income. They're transitioning out of their 9 to 5, and having a market that can give us some cash flow today is something I know a lot of insiders will, at least want to take a look at. I'll make sure to talk about Belleville. And I'd actually love to see some opportunities at a separate time. So if you have some performas, send them over my way. I'll be able to chat a little bit about it with some insiders.
Awesome.
I'd love to see that. So George, I appreciate you joining us today. Hearing about the Belleville market, the future employment growth as well as transit growth is really exciting. As well, you can buy duplexes in the 5s, and that's something that we don't see anymore in Southern Ontario. So that's exciting, and you can get some cash flow. How can people follow you? How can people see some of the great content you're producing?
I'm most active on Instagram, Facebook as well. My handle is @cashflowgeorge. As you can see, I like cash flow.
Yep.
And follow me there.
Nick, if you don't mind putting that in the chat.
Yeah, and just feel free to DM me there. My link tree is there if you want to. You can. There's a link to book a Calendly call with me if you want to have a chat. Just we just have a chat talk about what Belleville's here and what opportunities that make sense for you.
Yeah, I've done that a few times for all the insiders listening. You can also just send an email to info@REC Canada. I try to be the connector of sorts, George, with our insiders, and I try to make it as easy as possible for everyone to stay informed. And I really appreciate you spending your Sunday joining us. For everyone listening live or the recording, make sure to send George a message, give him a follow on Instagram @CashflowGeorge. We're back not next Sunday, but the Sunday afterwards. Jazz and Simi are going to be talking about their market update and some news that we're noticing in regards to real estate. Everyone enjoy your Sunday. And George, I'll leave it to you to kind of sign off. What are your plans for today?
Not much today. Probably get back to some emails. There's a multifamily deal that I've been looking at and going to send to some of my clients.
Hey, nice.
Yeah. If you want a low performing property that has a potential lift, this is it. Yeah. But otherwise,
send
I'm
it my way. Yeah, that's good. You had an event with your.
Oh yeah. Yesterday I had an awesome event. We hosted our most recent Quinte real estate. So Quinte is the Belleville area. That's what it's called. Just like Durham is around Oshawa. Quinte Real Estate Investors Meetup. We had an exciting afternoon right at Signal Brewery, right on the water. We just hang out in the sun, grab some drinks, and just talk real estate for hours. It was awesome.
That's my kind of day.
Yeah. Follow me on Instagram or Facebook if you want to know when the next one is. They're usually every 2 months or so. But
that's great.
Lots of value. Next one, we're probably going to have another more of an indoors event with a speaker, but it's a great opportunity to connect with some local people, see what other people are doing, see what the numbers are, how much money they're making, and what kind of challenges or opportunities that are available here that you wouldn't know unless you talk to somebody who's doing it.
Yeah, you're hearing real stories. That's why we do the Brunch with REC. It's good just to hear what other, like-minded investors are looking at in markets, right? So I appreciate the time today, George. Thank you for everyone, REC Nation, that has joined us. And we'll see you in 2 weeks. Thanks, everyone.